You're listening to Big World Network.
Delroy vs. the Yshtari, Episode 2, Soliloquy of a Villain. Written and read by Berin Stevens. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the front view screen as stars zipped by. The Rutherford's revenge continued to plummet toward the unknown sector of space dominated by the man-eating Yshtari. I didn't care. After all, I had just lost my battlebot and my cape, which can be quite depressing. After a while, I stood up and walked over to where Mink stood, hunched over. He did this every time I shot him. He'd bend over and shut himself off. I hit his reset switch, and his LED face came back to life. Am I still alive? He asked. Yes, I only shot you in the foot. You'll be fine. But I don't have feet. I have treads. Same thing. Every time he went through this routine, I felt a little guilty. True, robots don't feel pain, but it made me realize that I needed to learn to control my impulses. Someday. I went over to the control panel to assess the damage. I got down on my knees and examined the underside. Holy comets, Minx! What did you do to this thing? It looks like you attacked it with a meat cleaver. Minx answered, Well, sir, my programming is in cooking and household maintenance, along with that starship piloting ship you got me. I'm afraid I don't know anything about starship repair. What did you use? A meat cleaver. It was all I could find. I crawled out from under the panel. Minx, you are such an idiot. Then I went back to my seat in order to work myself up into a good depression. It had been a while since I'd done that, so I figured I was past due. Where have I gone wrong? I asked myself as I buried my head in my hands. If I may be so bold, sir, I don't think this life of crime that you had envisioned is right for you. You don't seem cut out for it. My personality assessment chip informs me that you would be much better suited to do something that uses motor skills instead of intelligence. Like knitting, perhaps. I put my hands over my ears. The last thing I needed was to be psychoanalyzed by a robot. He continued, his voice penetrating right through my hands. I think it all started when you left the Shakespeare troupe and decided to use your acting skills for illicit gains. I looked up at him. They are not illicit gains. There is a lot of loose money floating around in this galaxy, and all I'm trying to do is gather it up so that I can get filthy stinkin' rich and buy my own planet to retire on. What's wrong with that? It's the way you go about it, sir. For instance, trying to swindle the retirement away from those people at the rest home on Neelix 3. I wasn't swindling. I was only setting things up so that I could get their leftover money after they, well, you know. And then there was that meat-flavored plant you found and tried to pawn off to the inhabitants of Tyrone 6 as beef. You should have known that they'd have it analyzed before they bought any of it. All I was doing was selling a product. It's not my fault it didn't contain any protein. And that's the last time I'll ever give free samples. And then there was your last escapade, pretending to be Baron Rutherford so that you could extort money from people. It wasn't extortion. This is a dangerous part of space. All I was doing was offering them a protection service. But, sir, what you did was more like armed robbery. I started to argue until I realized he was right. What was I thinking? The scanner beeped. Minx, who stood next to it, turned his head to look. Sir, we're heading toward a solar system. That's nice, I said, trying to ignore him. I had more important things to think about. Armed robbery? I'm not some low-life thug. I'm an actor, a good one. Sir, you don't understand. We're heading straight toward an asteroid belt. His panic mode started to insert itself into his tone. Of course there's no money in acting. All those lessons, all those rehearsals. And what do I have to show for it? I always had to work a second job just to keep my bills paid. That's not right. My skills deserved better pay than that. There's no way we can navigate through an asteroid belt without functioning controls. You need to do something, sir. I waved my hand dismissively. You're the pilot. You take care of it. I'm busy. Sir, my left tread is not working. I can barely move. We're going to crash. By now, he'd worked his voice up into a frenzy. I leaned back in my chair. I mean, don't I deserve a life of luxury? I've worked hard my whole life and have nothing. Nothing! Sure, my mom is proud of me and loves to brag about her son, the actor, to her bridge club. But admiration from a bunch of old ladies isn't getting me ahead in the world. Sir, we only have 3 minutes until impact. Now he was rolling around in a circle and flailing his metal arms above his head. But armed robbery? How did I get from offering a security service to armed robbery? Maybe I should consider a different career path. Somehow, Minx had maneuvered himself to be right in front of me. He He reached out and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. "Sir, you must snap out of it. We are about to die." That worked like a glass of cold water in the face. Die? Yes, as in explode in a blazing ball of flame. Dying isn't good. Why are you bothering me? I'm trying to think. I lifted my blaster pistol and pointed it at him. He let go and rolled back. "Please don't, sir. I only beg of you to save us. I don't want to die." I aimed at his right tread. That way, I could leave the room and he wouldn't be able to follow me. But no, I realized. Shooting him wouldn't help me feel any better. And there was this whole dying in a fiery crash thing that I wasn't too fond of. How can I save us? We don't have any controls and no parts to repair them. Perhaps there's something you can do from the engine room. There are no controls there, just the two engines that are propelling us to our untimely deaths. I pointed the gun upward to aim at his central power core. That would stop his whining and complaining for good. "Don't cut my power, please," he begged. I stared at him for several seconds before I jumped up and shook the pistol at him. "That's it!" "No, please!" Minx bowed over and put his arms over his head. "You're right!" I slapped him on the shoulder as I felt a wave of newfound enthusiasm for life. He looked back up at me, his LEDs showing two wavy lines, indicating his confusion. "All I have to do is cut the power to one of the engines. It will turn us about and away from the asteroids. Once we're pointed back toward Earth-controlled space, I can cut the other engine and we'll drift to safety. I'm a stinking genius." I turned around and ran up the central corridor to the engine room. Once there, I aimed my gun at the power cable heading into the left engine and fired. Sparks flew everywhere. The sudden change in momentum sent me bouncing around the room like a sock in a dryer. It took a few seconds for the gravity compensator to adjust. Once it did, I regained my feet and ran back to check on the scanner. It had worked. We were now turning away from the asteroid belt. I estimated that in another 10 seconds we would be pointed back to safety, so I sprinted to the engine room while counting 10 alligators. I made it to the room at 9, counted one more, and then fired at the remaining power cable. The engine sputtered and stopped, leaving us drifting toward safety. I let out a whoop of joy. Sure, it would take a while for us to be found, but we had enough supplies that we could survive for a while. I would have plenty of time to get the communications working and call for help. The important things were that we weren't heading for the asteroids anymore, and I wasn't going to be eaten by any lobster people. And it would also give me the opportunity to come up with a new plan that would make me rich. Maybe even a legal one, too. "Sir!" Minx shouted from the control room. I fingered my gun again, contemplating where I could shoot him this time, before I turned around and headed to the room. When I arrived, I said, "Aren't you going to thank me for saving your metal butt?" Minx had resumed spinning in circles and flailing his arms. "We're still going to crash." "Now what?" I went over to the scanner and looked. There was a planet in front of us, but it appeared to me like we were going to miss it. "You big baby. We're going to shoot right past it. Stop your panicking." Minx stopped circling and pushed another button showing the influences of gravity on our trajectory. A dotted line appeared, now showing that we were going to be pulled toward the planet. "But sir, you forgot to account for the planet's gravity well."
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on BigWorldNetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.